Hi, everyone. Welcome to InfoTech Research Group's webinar on cybersecurity priorities in times of pandemic. First, a quick overview of InfoTech Research Group. InfoTech Research Group is an information technology research and advisory company producing unbiased and highly relevant research to help CIOs and IT leaders make strategic, timely, and well-informed decisions. InfoTech partners closely with IT teams to provide everything they need from actionable tools to analyst guidance, ensuring they deliver measurable results for their organizations. To make sure we have as smooth an experience as possible together, I want to review a few webinar logistics. All members of the webinar are muted. Please post any questions, comments, or technical challenges in the Q&A session. We will be monitoring the Q&A and will answer some questions at the end of the session. However, if we do not get to all attendees after this session based on the questions asked, after this webinar, we will send you a copy of the slides, a recording of the webinar, and a copy of the FAQs. Before we start, we'll quickly introduce our panelists today. My name is Aaron Shum, and I will be your host. I'm a practice lead at InfoTech Research Group in the security, risk, and compliance practice. With 20 plus years in IT ops, management, security operations, and privacy compliance, I oversee the analysts who generate research you see on a website and engage with our clients to learn how we can help with our research and advisory services. Over to you, Frank.
Thanks, Aaron, and welcome everyone for taking the time to join us this afternoon. My name is Frank Sargent. I'm a principal research advisor in the Security Risk and Compliance group here at InfoTech. I've been with InfoTech for about 2 years, but previous to that, spent 20 years working for a major IT outsourcer in their managed security services group, working across a lot of different verticals in that time, from defense, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, and then some. And that's a little bit about myself. I'll kick it over to you, Jimmy.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jimmy Tom. I'm a research advisor also in InfoTech's Security Risk and Compliance group. I started InfoTech around the same time as Frank, and I have the same level of experience in terms of having managed IT teams responsible for infrastructure, operations, service desk, projects, telecoms, IT security, and IT disaster recovery. During my career, security operations, infrastructure, architecture, and compliance has been a major focus, and I'm very happy to be here as your moderator for today's webinar. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Jimmy. For those on the line, we also have Paolo from our lovely IT team who's here to support us with our any technical issues. If you have any issues, please use the chat function and Paolo will be happy to help. In today's webinar, we have some major objectives we want to cover. Mainly, we're going to focus on key attack vectors that have been proliferating since the COVID-19 pandemic crisis forced significant changes into how your and our organization operate. We'll be looking at the top 5 priorities and expand on InfoTech's methodology to help your organization reduce your cyber attack surface. In addition to being able to download these slides, we'll also highlight any relevant COVID-19 resources along with links embedded in these slides. I'll now hand it over to Frank.
Thanks, Aaron. I think we're going to start here with the challenge, and I don't think anybody's new to the thought of what this COVID pandemic is doing for us here. It's certainly creating some unique challenges to any given organization. And it certainly seems, for me that over the past, when we talked about, something that could kind of affect an organization to this level, it'd be something along the lines of ransomware, some sort of ATP, something like this that could, bring an organization almost to its knees, if you will. But what we're finding out here is that this is more occurring as this pandemic, and then the social distancing is the real issue here, which is causing, that mitigation to the outbreak is actually causing quite an issue for organizations in terms of trying to maintain that distance and then still maintain the services and so forth that they're trying to look after, right? So it's certainly given us a lot of security challenge, a lot of organizational challenge. You know, when you think about just over 50% of work roles, it's estimated that are available to work remotely. You know, it really compounds the challenge. You know, and given the certain organizations, areas where you know, some are completely remote and some are not, the challenge varies greatly from organization to organization. Now, you know, some of the common obstacles that do occur in this at any given time for security come across in a few different areas. You know, the balance is always being enabling the services, enabling the organization, you know, accomplishing the business requirements, and then still protecting the organization to the level that it needs to be. And it's you know, this time, you know, with this COVID epidemic right now, we're certainly finding that these obstacles certainly are being intensified, if you will. And you know, it's something to be able to prioritize and understand and make sure that you can address these obstacles and still get mitigate the risk that the organizations are currently under. Now, you know, let me get to a thought here that you know, what we're trying to come across here on this webinar is more about InfoTech's approach here. You know, a lot of organizations are very into maybe knee-jerk reactions towards things, trying to get things done as quickly as possible. We're already hearing some organizations that are going under, you know, depending on how their profile is, service organizations and so forth that haven't been able to respond. So it's kind of facilitating this this knee-jerk type of an approach to certain things. And what we're trying to say here is, you know, for everybody that's on here and everybody that's using our methodologies and approaches, is to you know, not start from scratch. We're trying to actually, you know, show some things here that will help you prioritize, you know, help you figure out which ones, you know, which kind of things that we need to address first as this pandemic is taking hold. And you know, we still haven't even reached peak yet, you know, according to some of the researchers out there. And you know, what we're trying to do is bring those things that you know, as we do with our approach of talking to members and so forth, you know, bring that all together from a best practices sort of a standpoint. What are the priorities that we've been seeing from others, and kind of relay that back out to the webinar participants here and anybody else that's going to end up downloading this. So what we're finding, you know, is the top threats that we're seeing shouldn't be unfamiliar to anyone, you know, in terms of the phishing, you know, the emails that are going on right now. You're starting to see a lot of different manifestations of them, you know, as well as malicious applications and so forth. You see the COVID map, if you will, or even some of the aspects of Zoom and how it's been coming up, you know, of the different vulnerabilities that did show up in that when they're actually were trying to help in this sort of situation. But you know, you see the phishing, malware applications, you know, insecure endpoints. You know, that one's starting to manifest itself a little differently. We're starting to see, you know, even some of the organizations that had to quickly move to get many different laptops and so forth, even taking system units home. Some of the controls that you expect to, you know, being on site don't necessarily get reflected out when you're remote now. But you know, some of the standard things that now, you know, whether it's even from hurricanes and other these types of issues that do show up, that you know, that threat actors certainly take advantage of. You know, and try and infiltrate just from, you know, people's need to want to help, people's need to want to fix things, and again, you know, taking action quicker than you know, things are being prioritized properly. So you know, these are the ones that we're talking about a lot in our advisory calls and so forth, and the ones that we're suggesting are in the top area for threats. And just to take a step back here, I guess, we're going to prioritize against something. And what we have here is, you know, an overall best practice merge. Like what InfoTech has done here is taken our best practice merge of NIST, ISO, COBIT frameworks, and brought that together. So what you're seeing on the screen is more of a complete or, you know, a full type of a security domain. Some of the things in there are, you know, in scope for some organizations, security groups, some are not, you know, physical security and so forth, maybe with facilities and that sort of thing. So when we're trying to say prioritize, you certainly have to consider all the different elements of the security domains and security strategies that you have for your organization and what's in scope, and prioritize within that construct. You know, you can't not necessarily, you can't like let any of these things just go to the wayside and not consider them anymore. You still have to, you know, keep them dutifully in mind. And we're going to kind of go through a lot of them here and show kind of the methodology that we're in our approach towards that prioritization. And towards that, here is the top 5 that we are considering that you should take in consideration as to what's going to mitigate most of the risk that's currently surfacing right now as part of this pandemic. The very first one that we do highlight here is culture and awareness. What you're finding now with a lot more resources ending up at home, in certain areas of working remotely, that they don't necessarily understand some of the controls and so forth that were taken, for granted, as they say, went through the turnstile to get onto your site, that were within the buildings and so forth, even to the technical controls that are on the desktops and laptops and so forth, and systems that are within your organizations, even to the IoT type of an element, right, of some of the controls and mitigations that go around those. So, one of the first things that goes away, and that, it's almost always in top of mind, is culture and awareness, security awareness training and so forth. And it's a really good time right now to reinforce that. I know as people are going through a lot of different changes in how they would normally go through their day-to-day jobs of being remote, or having to respond to things differently, or having lack of staff and taking on extra things, is to try and get that emphasis on that culture and awareness and understanding of the risks towards the organization. And the next one's network security that we're calling out in these top 5, in that specifically, as we've started to move a lot of different resources and how they're coming into your organization from a remote perspective, a lot of the controls look different. You've put certain controls and technical controls and process controls in place to manage things in a certain sort of way, and now that's kind of turned upside down in a certain sort of way, depending on your organization. So it's something to consider what those impacts are towards your network security, as well as endpoint security. I know some organizations that I've talked to recently, they've had to go out and buy hundreds and hundreds of laptops, to be able to enable this remote access, to make sure that these things are patched. I've got the security stack installed. I've got all the controls and so forth and accesses that they do require, and not bypassing things like multi-factor or for remote access and these sort of things, to make sure that stuff is still there, because it was there for a reason and you need to maintain that. Vulnerability management is another one that, maybe doesn't necessarily show up in some others, but to understand, that endpoint, understanding where these devices are now. A lot of organizations will, scan for patching, these sort of things from a vulnerability perspective. If they're out on remote VPN tunnels and so forth, now becomes a little bit more tricky, making sure that you are actually understanding the complete vulnerability landscape of your organization, when you now have to change how these scans and all these sort of things are working. And then the fifth one here is security incident management. That whole old adage of, it's not if, it's when. Well, these kind of events in the world, whether it's hurricanes and again and so forth, these types of things really bring out the worst in some, from threat actors, and taking advantage of these sort of things. So your incident management plans and so forth, playbooks and all those processes and so forth that you had in place, to look after things when everybody was in the building or everybody was in a certain sort of way, maybe needs some reflection now of understanding of what the new reality is, of where people are, how you're going to respond, who you need to contact, what those escalation lists are, that sort of thing. Certainly needs to have some consideration there for sure. Now, having said the top 5, and reflecting back on that whole overall framework we had, some organizations were already ready. Like some sales organizations, even some other organizations that I've talked to that are completely remote. They don't even have any physical manifestation of like bricks and mortar at all. Everybody's remote. You can kind of skip over some of those because you've already got those types of controls matured and in place, and maybe kind of slide onto some of these secondary and tertiary types of ones. Again, keeping in mind that you really can't forget about what's going on in the whole overall framework of your security program, and that maybe some things are more prioritized for other organizations than they are for yours. And again, we're talking about what we've kind of brought together overall here from the top 5, if you will. Now, just to expand on that whole thought of secondary, tertiary types of domains within that security program. You know, we've talked about those top ones of security, cultural and awareness, network security, endpoint, vulnerability management, and security incident management. Some of the other colors here, the red ones were our top fives, but the oranges are coming in, you know, kind of a, not quite a distant second, but into second place, depending on how you kind of count this up and where how your organization is. But risk management is one that comes up for me right away, that should be considered as well from a more strategic standpoint. You know, you're being asked to do all these changes. You're being asked to do all this extra work that's quicker, faster, emergency change controls, all this sort of thing. Maybe going around certain architectural decisions, especially with respect to remote access. You got to kind of document a lot of those sort of things and make sure that you understand the risks that they put at your organization at and review those. Make sure you understand them, make sure you revisit them later. You know, and totally understand what it is what balance you're creating about the level of effort towards culture and awareness, network security, and so forth, and you're bringing back towards risk management. Strategy and communication. Communication is definitely a warranted thing here in that, you know, as these things are moving quickly, as you're trying to mitigate risks, as you're trying to ensure that the organization continues to run, provide the services, you know, maximize the revenue, you know, whatever that business driver is, you've got to be able to communicate what those risks are back up to more of the senior leadership. Data privacy, certainly, you know, as data is starting to move around, and maybe not in the places that you originally considered it as part of getting remote access working for organizations pushing more things to the cloud and so forth. You know, you really got to keep in mind what your organization's trying to do towards data, what you're trying to protect, and make sure you keep that in mind. You know, log and event management, you know, is towards, I guess, some of the other ones as well in terms of managing compliance obligations and those other ones that are more in yellow. Those compliance obligations and maybe even legal obligations that you have to maintain, the credibility and so forth. So, you know, the logging and event management and so forth, you know, you've got to keep those in mind as well. You know, we've got hardware asset management in yellow. That could be, you know, from a prioritization standpoint, that could be a bit higher depending on how many laptops you had to buy. So, you know, again, you know, we're putting forward a suggestion here. You know, your mileage may vary, but, you know, here's where we're starting. And I think it's not an unreasonable spot to do so. Jimmy, we have an activity towards cybersecurity priorities. So if you want to comment on that.
Yes, so what you see here is one of our tools. So as part of our blueprints, we also offer tools and templates that are standard, that allow you to make valuable use of our research in a very meaningful way. Our research is not prescriptive, so you may have seen some of the cybersecurity priorities that may or may not be relevant to you because you may have taken some compensating controls or have defense in depth mechanisms to mitigate some of the risk. And so what we've done here is we've listed all the cybersecurity priorities, the top ones, the secondary and tertiary ones in the color order format. And we provided you with a list of the various NIST controls that are associated with those. What you can do is basically use this tool to brainstorm. You with your team, look at your security posture, look at your current security strategy, look at what you have in place and determine, is this relevant to us or not? If not, simply select the no option and it will change the row of each of the security controls for you. In essence, once you're done with the tool, it will give you a nice visual way for you to prioritize your cybersecurity focus and really key in on the important points that you need to focus on.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy. I think you might have been hearing so far, and you know, a few things that I've been saying in a lot of discussions, and maybe even in amongst you know, different organizations and yourselves, if you're involved in ISACs or anything else, that you know, remote workers seem to be the spot where you're considering the most risk, and this is where we're saying that the focus is right now. You know, if there's a bit of a spin, there's a bit of a churn going on right now. You know, that's the spot to focus on. You know, and again, you know, to reiterate the culture and awareness, you know, the opportunity here now to make sure that we understand what's going on what kind of risks this type of change of work culture puts your organization at, and making sure that we reinforce that as as often as we can in a certain sort of way. We certainly don't want to get into the security awareness training fatigue, if you will, but it is still something that needs to be addressed most definitely. And you certainly got an opportunity here to pinpoint that towards the new change in reality. And again, reiterating the endpoint security and incident management here in terms of ensuring that the endpoints that you now thought were in the building, or these resources that you thought were in a building or behind a firewall, or however those controls are, certainly has to go back out now and reevaluate how they're getting connected, how they're getting patched, how they're getting scanned, how they're getting access to data, in all those different sort of ways. And again, incident management of when these incidents and when these events do happen, to make sure that you've updated your runs books, updated your documentation, make sure that everything's now reflected to be able to respond as the most efficient way possible moving forward. Now, we've been talking a bit, and I've kind of reiterated a few times on culture and awareness, and the defense against phishing and bad domains and social engineering and so forth. We've certainly got quite a bit of research at InfoTech in terms of kind of creating that overall security awareness program. We've got actually specific research about how to expand that during the COVID response and so forth. But there's we've got basically a standard 6-step process, and I'm not going to read the wall of text here for you, but what we're doing right now, and considering, or what you should consider, is gaining the support of this whole overall security awareness in and amongst everything else that's trying to get communicated to these new end users and their new ways of working. But get this initiative through socialization. Get a lot of communication going. It's the best way to get things started. Create that communication plan for the program. Understand who you're trying to get this information out to, what kind of cadence, what's going on with that communications, and making sure that the right topics get to the right individuals, depending on how that is occurring. Maybe not everybody's working remote. Maybe they already know about all this sort of stuff. So kind of getting the right theme to the right group in the right way. And you've got to determine that training audience group, right? Like, who is it? What unique sets of requirements are there? Do you have administrative access? Are we kind of skirting some of these privileged access management types of things, to try and get certain things done right now? And to make sure that we get the right training to the right groups at the right time, depending on what their risk profiles are and what kind of training makes the most sense. Specifically right now is the remote aspects of, having end users out there at home when, maybe you didn't have a telework policy. Maybe you didn't have a lot of these things already figured out. We can certainly help with those types of aspects, but, to try and get that type of training and so forth right out to the right groups in the right way, and is the third phase here, as well as assigning the topics to the audience groups and ensure the targets. Again, we're trying to make sure, get the right training, right content, right where that needs to be, as the next spot here is determine training content and source, and then create that roadmap for the development. Right now we're trying to get, focus on getting the right training to the right individuals. How do I, shore up my home networks and so forth, because I never had to do that before. I'm working remote now. I got an old router. What do I do? These kind of different documentation that needs to get out to people if they are doing the new remote work and haven't had a time to get some rigor around what that might look like. Certainly need to consider that as part of the training programs of understanding what risks and how they need to be mitigated. Now, again, we're still kind of focusing on this, remote aspect type of an idea of a remote work situation, where things have changed. The businesses are unable to ensure the physical security of a home setup. Have you went down any of those types of policies and procedures of how to make sure that your new work environment is secure, it's safe, it's, you're, from clean desk policies on down, are you allowing access in certain areas, or are you only going to have them work from home? Does whether the coffee shop's open or not right now is up for debate in certain jurisdictions, but, what kind of physical safety is around and security is around the individual while they're trying to conduct business for your organization. But the businesses are unable to control or ensure the security of a network that the employees are using. Reflecting back on who knows how secure anybody's individual home networks are, if you will. Do you got an open SSID that the neighbors that they're sharing with the neighbors? You never know. So kind of getting a lot of those kind of thoughts out towards those individuals, and making sure that they understand the risks that go with that. Taking responsibility for mitigating those risks to the organization as a whole. And this is where that training comes in. Can't go on enough about the training and communication, and making sure that as part of what's going on right now, that we get that out there as specific as we can. And again, the endpoint security aspect, from the ransomwares and malwares. I did see one of the news article about how one ransomware group was going to avoid going after healthcare at this point in time, but then that just left the opportunity for several others to step in and continue their assaults. This is almost a never-ending thing, and now they're just taking advantage of people stretched thin. You've got to be diligent in this space from an endpoint security perspective. So part of the endpoint security aspect here is that we've created at InfoTech a checklist as part of our pandemic response work here, a checklist for helping to secure remote workers that goes down through the physical manifestations of how they might consider things, the home networks, how do I change certain things? Do I hide my network SSID? That sort of an idea. So we've tried to get at least a kickstart for you in a template that you can download and kind of edit and deal with to make it more specific to your organization, and get it out again as part of the training and resource materials that you're going to provide to these remote workers. Get that out there and help mitigate some of those risks. Again, I'm on incident management and making sure that we know what we're doing. When there's a problem, when there's something going on, we want to make sure that we respond as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I can't go on about certainly use this opportunity to almost your stress testing in a certain sort of way, your DR and a few other things. Collect data, but collect as much data as you can. But use that to update these run books. Understand your escalation lists. As you're going through some of these pandemic response types of ideas, where you're starting to manage and see some of the different issues that are coming into your service desk about remote support. Who needs to be escalated? Review and update those sort of things. Consider what those attack vectors look like. Where you need to collect some of this threat intel, how you would need to disperse it again. I can't put whatever type of threat intel onto this platform anymore because everyone's out VPN'd in remotely. How am I going to support this? How am I going to respond to it? So really use this opportunity to flesh those incident response plans out, making sure that in the end we review it all with the stakeholders and make sure that everybody does understand what their role is in security incident management. Now we certainly got a lot of templates towards that. Our incident response blueprints of ransomwares and multiple different templates and Visios and so forth that would really help. If you haven't got anything in place yet, that would really help kickstart your incident response plan.
Well, thank you, Frank, for running us through all of this. I'm sure security is top of mind for a lot of us, second to just making sure our employees and our customers are safe. To summarize all the wonderful guidance that Frank has provided today, here are the key takeaways. I know, as Frank mentioned, knee-jerk reactions are going to be your first thought. Many of you may still be firefighting to make sure that your IT operation continues without interruption. Many of you are still just adjusting to the remote work. But most importantly, don't simply just firefight and deprioritize things. As Frank alluded to in our framework, many initiatives have dependencies, many initiatives you're going to have to go back to later. So focus on just reprioritizing all your efforts, ensure that what you do over the next few weeks are funneled back into your information security strategy and roadmap. Second, focus, and I think we've beat that quite well this afternoon.
Yeah.
Focus first on your remote workers. They are definitely a risk factor depending on your setup. Considerations include the sensitivity of data being processed by these remote workers, and also the number and ratios of managed versus non-managed devices in your mix. Secure them by a layered defense approach. And lastly, ensure you maintain visibility. Remote workers has really likely shifted your operational model, so review your event detection and response processes and update your runbooks as needed. For example, as you need, our resources here include new content created for InfoTech's COVID-19 response site. There was a question in the Q&A asking whether this material will be available after this webinar. This PowerPoint presentation will be sent to you via the email you used to register. And all of these links will link to available material that most of which you can simply register and download. Some of these may link to existing InfoTech material that will be tied to a product and services. But if you need any help navigating any of these resources, I encourage you to reach out to your account manager. They would be more than happy to help point you to the right direction or connect you with one of our analysts to speak more deeply about this topic. And now I'm going to hand things over to Jimmy to begin our Q&A part of the session.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. So many of the questions, I believe, were answered throughout the course of the presentation. So thank you so much. We will be aggregating the questions and sending out the FAQ along with the materials when we have them, when we compile them. A few key questions that were asked, just to recap, in terms of phishing and in terms of whether now's the right time to educate your end users on email scams. Absolutely. Just to reinforce Frank's point on the people and culture piece, we highly recommend that activity. What we're seeing is that is one very major attack vector that's been reported. Your end users, they're all working remotely. They need to know the difference between an email from the IT department and an email from an imposter posing as the IT department. Other questions. My company doesn't have in-house infrastructure and uses cloud systems like Office 365. Does it make sense in this case to run penetration tests? The quick answer is yes. Now, the caveat is ensuring that you coordinate with your cloud provider, whether you're using a SaaS solution, a platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service, whether you're using the full Azure suite. The last thing you want is for your cloud provider to perceive you as being an attacker, and that's exactly how it will look if you run a penetration test on their infrastructure. So absolutely do so, but bear in mind, please coordinate with your service providers to ensure that they are part of the strategy. Next question. We work with a number of financial services companies, and they have seen a great deal of channel migration away from the physical channels. Given the desire by governments to leverage financial services for funding distribution, is there a need to relax risk posture? Aaron or Frank, would you like to table that?
Hey, Aaron, it's Frank here. I can jump in on that one. About, I would say, relax your risk posture is more reframing the risk and understanding why you're going down that path. It's certainly an opportunity. You know, this situation is an opportunity in a lot of different ways to look at a lot of different things that have been, you know, ingrained in certain organizations, and you know, reconsidering how you're going to do certain things, and this is certainly one in terms of even remote access, or you know, like in this situation as well. But it's not so much I would think a reduction of risk, but just an understanding and reframing of it. It's certainly an opportunity, and I would take advantage of it most certainly. You know, but understanding what that risk is and framing it against your risk tolerance and so forth, not necessarily characterizing it as in certain sort of ways, but make sure that you understand what that looks like and do like full threat and risk assessment and so forth. But, you know, take this as an opportunity towards that.
Great, thank you, Frank. Next question, do you feel Windows Defender is sufficient for endpoint protection, or should an organization invest in third-party tools like Norton, Malwarebytes, etc.?
Yeah, Jimmy, I can take that one. That question actually pops up quite frequently here in InfoTech. Our clients, you're tied in with Microsoft with your licensing, and Microsoft often does just enough in their suite of products. From an operational decision or management decision perspective, I would recommend looking at your endpoint protection as one of your tools to defend against attacks. We actually have a software reviews division that actually has user feedback generated reviews on these products. And what we've seen is ultimately from an end user perspective, they want to make sure that endpoint protection, advanced threat detection, etc., are parts of their layered defense mechanism. And it really comes down to the feature sets that you need from these products. Malwarebytes, Norton, some of the Defender or Sophos, etc., all have varying feature sets depending on the licensing model, depending on the product that you select. So it's important first for you to identify which detection and defense mechanisms you need in your ecosystem, and then determine whether, for example, Windows Defender, based on the price point or based on the fact that Microsoft can bundle them, is good enough for you. But make sure that in front of your Defender, you also have additional capabilities that are defending. And to Frank's point, and I think we've again beaten that one quite thoroughly, making sure that you have the ability to report on and detect anomalies, detect events that happen within these products. So consider whether you have a SIM or not, how your team is going to gain visibility into threats that are captured or anomalies that are happening in your endpoints. That's arguably more important than the actual brand or technology that's available. It's making sure that you have a good understanding of how frequently these would happen. There was an article a couple of months back on the effectiveness on some of these products that's floating out there. There's a report stating that some of these products can only capture 97% of threats. Again, if you're relying on your endpoint protection to be your only defense, that's going to be a problem. You want that to be your last line of defense.
Excellent, thank you, Aaron. Next question, please share any information around collaboration tools such as Zoom and Teams.
Yeah, I can pick that one up as well, Jimmy. So, personally, even before the debacle happened, I've been looking at the news coming up on Zoom. Personally, I am a privacy advocate. So when news broke that Zoom had a lot of privacy considerations, my initial and reactive response was, well, they're selling your data. Obviously, whenever you're leveraging things like Facebook login or Google login, you need to read your fine prints. If you have an agreement with these identity providers, especially if you're getting the module or the identity solution for cheap or for free, chances are they are selling or using the analytics information out of these identity platforms. Ultimately, when we look at other security issues that are popping up on Zoom, when we think about the security concerns around the thoroughness of its encryption, some of the researchers have been finding in order for Zoom to pull some of the reporting mechanisms that would give you insight as to how your meetings are being used across the organization, they'd have to compromise on security or end-to-end encryption. And that likely holds true for any type of consumer grade type of messaging or collaboration platform. When you look at platforms that are more established, such as Teams and WebEx, et cetera, it's funny. Jimmy popped off a little bit. His WebEx crashed earlier. Some of these tools have evolved and have been designed to be more secure, and there's a lot of considerations around how the web conferencing technology is tunneled through secure servers and secure channels, and the result of that is they may not run as smoothly as some of the newer platforms coming out of these startups. My overarching recommendation is look at all the fine prints and do your own risk assessment as to the types of information you're divulging in these platforms, who's using them. Ease of use may not, while it's often a business requirement, there's Zoom bombing is a thing, right? Especially a lot of governments, public organizations that are reacting to COVID-19 decided to use Zoom and open up access. And when you're not controlling who has access to typing or sharing information on these platforms, that's a problem. So business use case analysis may not be a security consideration all the time, but work hand in hand with your IT and IT operational groups, IT infrastructure groups, and work with your business groups to determine how security factors in, right? Security here in InfoTech, we always advocate security teams must be a business enabler, as must be a business partner. And this is a good example of not thinking about just reactive measures to lock down a platform, but working collaboratively with the business to understand what is the business use case and what's the risk with using the platform that you're selecting, and how best we can secure your platform against the risks that exist.
Excellent, thank you, Aaron. I'm just mindful of the time, so we'll likely have time for one last question. With respect to remote work, this is not a new concept and merely an extension of organizations' workforce that are working remotely. Can you speak to organizations and their preparedness or lack thereof pertaining to this from a cybersecurity perspective? Shouldn't these priorities be discussed in tabletop exercises and lessons learned from previous incidents which may have caused employees to work remotely?
Jimmy, I can grab that one. It certainly was, and something I'd mentioned earlier in the presentation about, organizations are across a lot of gradient here of remote work and so forth, and maturity levels and whatnot. And this certainly is an opportunity. We've kind of pointed out a couple of times where use this as an opportunity to stress test those tabletop exercises, those incident response run books and so forth. If you're solid in remote access and these sort of spaces, that maybe that go into some of those secondary and tertiary types of areas of starting to stress and understand what those types of risks, what types of mitigations you would put into those types of spaces. So yep, it's certainly, we're trying to come across from a high level here of, the top 5 types of things here. But, if that doesn't land well for you, we could certainly have a conversation, after the fact here, but depending on what you think that is, but certainly is take this as an opportunity. The tabletop exercises are an excellent opportunity to kind of, go through one of these scenarios. But here we're in something that's a little bit almost live, that almost gets you some real data towards some of those other ends. So, it's not necessarily a focus. I know we have beaten this remote worker type of thing to death here, and it may not have been completely applicable for you. But, again, I think the overall theme here is to take as an opportunity to expand and know and understand how these things are impacting your organization, and, get the data to support how you can better mature that area.
Thank you, Frank. And we're coming up on time here, but I did see one more question here relating to Zoom, and want to just quickly jump in here before we close our webinar today. The question was, have Zoom security issues been dealt with? Do you recommend using it? To be honest, when we look at a lot of cloud services and platforms out there, security maturity is always a question, right? And Zoom security may not be any less secure or less robust than many of the other cloud providers that you may be using. If you look at price points, if you look at the fundamental securities that are documented in these platforms. So as part of your vendor security management process, it's important to read the fine prints. Go to the Trust Center, Compliance Center, or read the SOW or MSA that's provided to you by your cloud vendor, and review like whether these are just checkbox items, right? Often they'll say, well, we have physical security, we ensure that we log everything, but read between the lines and understand what the true risks are. What I've seen from a publication from Zoom is that they are trying to close these security issues. They've gone on a feature freeze to try and, from an agile perspective, fix the problems that they have. So it really comes down to your use case and your concerns regarding privacy or security of your data. If you're having a social distancing meeting with your family, Zoom is probably safe enough to use, but I'll just throw it out there. Many of the other providers are also providing free for personal use to try their platforms as well. So I would just look at this based on your comfort level. So Frank, if you don't mind advancing to the last slide here. We are just a minute over today. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. I know this is tough times for everyone, but I'm sure all of you are doing what's necessary. If you have any questions, we are going to be publishing this webinar, and we will send over the webinar and a list of answers to the frequently asked questions. But feel free to reach out. My contact information is here. If you would like to find out more about our product and services, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dave Bell, whose contact information I've included here as well. Hope you all have a great rest of the day, and everyone stay safe.